Planting a rose, something sure to strike fear in the hearts of gardeners absolutely everywhere, because we've made it so complicated. You know what I'm talking about? How big of a hole? 2 by 2? What do I put in the hole? What do I not put in the hole? What kind of soil? What kind of fertilizer? No fertilizer. Do I water it in? Do I not water it in? How deep do I plant the bud union? What is a bud union? What if it's on root? Where's my bud union? And your whole head explodes. Before I came out here just for fun, I went on the internet and I Googled planting roses. I got 3.5 million pages of information. For the heck of it, I Googled broken leg. I got 3.5 million pages of that. That means there's as much information on the internet about planting a rose as there is about breaking your leg. That's getting a little bit ridiculous. Just remember the whole theme of this entire video series. Roses are plants too. So I'm going to take you through the steps of planting, in this case, a grafted rose that's in a container, and show you just how simple this really is, and how that if you planted other plants in your garden, you already know how to do this and probably don't even need this video. Getting ready to start digging my holes, and that's why I'm using a rake. Which makes no sense at all. I certainly realize that. But let me explain. This plays into that whole how big should the rose hole be kind of thing. You know, should it be 2 by 2 or whatever. I don't go with that. I just prefer to say how big is the whole planting area and just work the whole thing. And this begins months before you actually start planting your roses, or any plants for that matter. You got to have a rich soil base. So if you start 3 or 4 months ahead of time with layering in compost, working it in, raking it out, let nature do its thing and rot the stuff into the ground, your whole bed is going to be ready to go. So that defeats the entire purpose for digging a big hole and adding even more amendment. So the last thing that I'm doing before I plant today is 1 more layer of compost about 1 inch thick. Then I'm going to go ahead and start digging my holes. Starting to dig the hole, getting down in there pretty good. I'm going about as wide as a root ball because don't forget I've amended that area all around it, so I don't need to worry about getting a big 2 by 2 foot hole, because this is a new bed. Now, what do you do if it's an old bed that's already got roses in it? You obviously can't amend the whole area all over again and till it all up and stuff, because you'll disturb the other roses. If you've been practicing good gardening all along, you don't need a 2 by 2 foot hole in an existing rose bed either. Because what you should be doing every single year is a layer of compost and a layer of mulch, and then next year layer of compost, layer of mulch on top of that, allowing it to deteriorate every single year into your soil and not raking it off. So therefore, your entire rose bed is already fine. So if you have an existing rose bed, the same thing applies. A hole a little bit bigger than the root ball, but dig it reasonably deep, and we'll show you why in just a moment. Now that the hole is dug, we're ready to plant the rose. This brings us to another controversy in rose growing, which is, do you bury or do you not bury the bud union? First of all, let me show you what the bud union is. It's this piece right here. It's where the rose was grafted onto understock, which is this shank down here, and the root system. So from here up, it's the rose you paid for. From here down, it's understock. And by the way, bud unions do not exist on own root roses. That's a whole different thing. Now, the conventional wisdom has always been, if you live up north, you want to bury the bud union. Why? Well, if you get a freeze and the rose dies back to the ground, at least the bud union's underneath the soil and hopefully can rejuvenate new canes and your rose comes back. And if you live down south, we were always told to keep the bud union above the ground, in fact maybe 1 inch above the ground. Why? I've never really quite been able to figure out, because if you can bury them up north, why can't you bury them in the south? The only thing that I've ever come up with is that basically that some roses needed that vigorous understock because they couldn't survive on their own roots. Well, an own root rose doesn't apply to that. But here's why I'm going to tell everybody to bury the bud union no matter where you live. Windrock. What is that? If I don't bury that bud union, and I've got this sticking above the ground, look how small that base is for that plant. And if I get a windstorm, that rose is going to do this, and I've even seen them snap clean off. By burying that bud union down to here, that gives me a much more stable base. The other thing that's going to happen by burying the bud union no matter where you live is eventually this rose will actually revert to its own roots, which in my opinion is a good thing. So no matter where you live, bury the bud union. Is there an exception to every rule? Absolutely. If you buy roses on Fortuniana and you live in sandier soils like Florida, for example, then you don't, because you need that Fortuniana rootstock to basically stand off a nematode that you've got to deal with. So, besides that, no matter where you live, north, south, hot weather, cold weather, on a grafted rose, always bury the bud union. Got the rose in the hole. Starting to backfill a little bit. Remember, I don't really need to add amendment because I've been amending as I go by this layer of compost I put on earlier. Well, I hope that basically addresses some of the questions. The whole hole question, basically I hope that you don't really need a 2 by 2 foot hole as long as your bed is ready to go and well amended. And if you're digging an existing bed, it's the same thing. I've buried the bud union, you've noticed that, so I'm not going to get any windrock when the wind starts to go. That's going to keep that protected, so you want to take care of that. You're probably at this point just sitting back and looking at yourself and thinking, well, wait a minute, that looks like planting any other kind of plant. Bingo, you got it. That's exactly what I'm trying to tell you right now. You know how to plant plants in your yard. You know how much amendment you need for the soil that you've got. You know what kind of amendments you want to put in there. Bone meal. I put a little bone meal in the bottom of this hole. You know how much amendment you have to add depending on bringing up the quality of your soil. Maybe you need to do something that retains water. Maybe you need to do something that increases drainage. So if you've planted other plants in your garden successfully, plant your roses the same way. You already know how to do it. Because remember, roses are just plants too.